On the day of his wedding, a respected police officer discovers that the bride standing beside him is not who he believed her to be, and the secret she carries will not just change their lives, it will shake the entire city. Two identical sisters, one groom, one wedding, and a truth so dangerous that even speaking it could destroy everything. Everyone thought it was a perfect love story, until the doors of cathedrals shut by themselves. What followed next was something no one was prepared to witness. He believed he knew who he was. He believed he knew who he loved. But the truth was never his to begin with. And today, everything hidden will rise. A love story born in silence. A secret buried in identity. And on the wedding day, the past finally comes to claim its place. Very strong suspense tone. The bells rang. The doors opened. But no one entered. And in that silence, the truth that was never meant to be spoken began to unveil itself. Emotional plus tragic plus curiosity. She was willing to lose everything to protect him, even her name, even her own identity. But today, the truth stands between love and fate. Title: The Wedding That Shook the City. The city of Radanon was draped in evening gold when the ceremony began. The bells of the grand cathedral chimed throughout the bustling streets, their echo carrying whispers of admiration and curiosity. Everyone had heard the rumors, yet none could say with certainty what was true. Captain Arut stood at the altar, his police uniform traded for a tailored ivory suit. To many, he was a national hero, a symbol of justice, a man whose mere presence could calm chaos. But tonight, his hands trembled, though his face did not show it. The bride walked toward him, veiled and radiant in a silk gown that shimmered like water under moonlight. Her steps were gentle, almost hesitant. Her smile was soft and private, as if hiding a world behind it. The crowd admired her grace, yet they could not ignore a strange, uneasy hush that passed among them like a chill. They all knew, or thought they knew. The bride was one of the famous twin sisters, Mira and Lila. Only one was standing here. But which one? The two sisters were known throughout the nation. Their beauty was undeniable, yet their personalities were like opposing tides. Mira was warm, patient, quietly luminous. Lila was sharp, magnetic, holding secrets in her eyes that no one could fully read. Both had been seen with Arut. Both had history with him, yet neither had ever publicly claimed him. The ceremony began with roses and blessings, but beneath the gentle music was an emotion that felt heavy, as if the air itself was waiting to break. Arut lifted the bride's veil. A soft gasp stirred among the guests. Her eyes met his with an expression impossible to decipher. Her gaze held affection. Yet behind that affection was something unsaid. Arut felt it immediately, like a forgotten memory brushing the surface of his mind. He had studied every emotion on every criminal's face throughout his entire career. But the expression in her eyes did not belong to Mira, nor to Lila, as he remembered them. The priest spoke blessings, but Arut heard nothing. He watched the bride's fingers when she placed her hand in his. He felt the slight hesitation, the faint tremor, the weight of a truth unspoken. When he repeated his vows, his voice was steady, yet his heart pulsed with a quiet ache of uncertainty. The crowd saw love, but inside him was a growing storm. The moment came for the bride to speak her vow. Her lips parted, but before any words could form, the church doors burst open with a deep, echoing bang. Every head turned. A woman stood there. She was wearing the same gown, the same veil, the same delicate jewelry, but her posture was different. Her presence was fierce, filled with urgency and grief. She stepped forward slowly, her voice steady and clear. Every word she spoke carried the weight of truth and heartbreak. Arut, before you finish this wedding, you must know who she really is. Gasps rose. Chairs shifted. Whispers scattered like startled birds. Arut's breath stopped. The bride beside him did not move. Only her eyes lowered, as if she had known this moment would come. The woman at the entrance removed her veil, revealing a face identical to the one standing next to him. Perfectly identical. Twin sisters. Yet something deeper than identity was at stake. A silence filled the cathedral. A silence so sharp it could cut. Arut's voice broke through it, steady but heavy. Which one of you is my bride? Neither answered immediately. The truth was in the room, alive, trembling, waiting. The guests watched, breath held, hearts racing. The bride at his side slowly raised her eyes, and her voice was quiet, almost fragile, yet unyieldingly real. You married the one who has always loved you. But love alone is not the whole truth. The second sister took a step closer, tears streaking down her face. And the one who stands before you now did not come here to take you away. She came to save you. Arut's pulse thundered. Save him from what? The candles flickered as if reacting to a shift in the air. The story of his life was about to change. The truth behind the twins, their past, their promise, their secret, all of it was about to surface. And the ceremony no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like the unveiling of something the world was never meant to see. The cathedral doors remained open. The wind carried the scent of rain. And the city waited for the revelation that could shatter everything. The moment hung suspended, unfinished, unanswered, and the truth was just about to begin. Arut's heartbeat pressed like thunder against his ribs. The cathedral seemed to shrink around him, its high ceilings now heavy and close. Both sisters stood before him, identical in form, but shaped by entirely different storms within. The bride who stood beside him lowered her hands to her chest, fingers clasped tightly. Her breathing was slow and silent, as if she had prepared for this confrontation long ago. Her eyes did not tremble. She looked at the other sister with a gaze that held both sorrow and certainty. The sister who had entered late stepped forward. Her footsteps echoed sharply, each one like a verdict. Her voice held the raw edge of desperation that comes only from love, fear, and unspoken truths. Arut, she said, you fell in love with the one who saved your life. But she did not save it alone. Arut felt memories stir, rising like a shadow from the depths of his mind. The rain, the abandoned warehouse, the sound of gunfire, a hand gripping his, pulling him away when his strength was nearly gone. But whose face had he seen in that moment? One memory, two possible owners. A confused whisper ran through the guests, unsure whether this wedding was a celebration or a confession being forced into daylight. The bride beside Arut finally spoke, her voice soft but unwavering. There was a promise made between us, when we were young. No matter what happened, we would protect him, both of us, even if it meant one of us would lose him. The late-arriving sister closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to hide tears, but to remember something deeply buried. When Arut was wounded, I dragged him out of gunfire. I shielded him when he fell. I called for help. But Mira was the one who stayed beside him afterward, nursing him, listening to him, becoming the one he reached for in the night. The guests listened, drawn into the gravity of the truth unraveling. Arut's hands felt cold. He looked at the bride beside him. Her expression remained tender, but her silence now carried a weight that felt ancient. The other sister stepped even closer, standing only a few feet from the altar now. Her tears had dried, leaving behind a steady calm, the kind that forms only when a person has accepted pain fully. Arut, you love her because she was there, but she was there because I told her to go to you. I told her to stay by your side, even if it meant you would never know it was me who bled for you. The air felt like it froze. Mira, Lila, love chosen, love hidden, a bond between sisters deeper than anything spoken. The bride finally turned to Arut. Her voice carried a tenderness that broke something inside him. Love is not always earned in the moment it is felt. Sometimes love is built on sacrifice unseen. You do not need to choose between us because a choice was already made long ago by both of us. Together. Arut's breath trembled, though he did not speak. The crowd waited, eager for his reaction, but emotion held him silent. The late-arriving sister continued. There is one more truth you must hear. The night of the gunfire was not random. It was not fate. Someone targeted you. Someone who knew exactly what you meant to both of us. A wave of shock rippled through the guests. This wedding was no longer about love. It was about danger, secrets, and a threat still in the shadows. Arut's eyes sharpened, instinct shifting from lover to investigator. Who? He asked, his voice low and steady. Both sisters exchanged a look heavy with fear. The doors of the cathedral remained open. The sky had darkened outside. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the city like an omen. Before either sister could answer, the cathedral lights flickered. A cold draft swept through the aisle, extinguishing several candles. The guests shivered. Both twins turned their heads at the same time, as if sensing something no one else could see. Arut stepped forward slightly, protective, alert. But no one spoke. Not yet. The truth was at the edge of being revealed, so close that every heart seemed to hold itself still. Every breath in the room hovered on the edge of a moment that was about to break. And then the doors at the back of the cathedral creaked again, slowly, almost deliberately. Someone else was about to enter, someone who should not be there, someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. The entire city would remember what happened next. But what happened next did not come yet. Not yet. The moment froze there, suspended, electric, unresolved. The cathedral doors opened with a slow, deliberate push, as if the force behind them knew exactly how to command attention without needing to rush. Every eye in the room shifted toward the entrance, breaths held in the same single, fragile moment. A man stood framed in the doorway, tall, composed, dressed in a charcoal suit that did not reflect any light, as though it swallowed the room's brightness into itself. His presence was quiet, yet impossible to ignore. His eyes were what unsettled everyone first. They held a familiarity that no one wanted to acknowledge, a gaze that carried history. Wounds, scars that did not show on skin, but lived behind the pupils. Arut's shoulders tightened, his instincts rising like iron. He knew this man, not by name, but by consequence. The bride beside him did not look away, but her fingers tightened just slightly, enough for Arut to feel the tremor she had tried to hide all this time. The other sister inhaled sharply and stepped in front of the crowd, as though shielding them from something unseen. The man walked forward with the slow confidence of someone who did not fear judgment or consequence. His footsteps echoed against the marble floor, each step measured, precise. Not a single flower petal on the aisle shifted out of place under his shoes. "Captain Arut, the man said, his voice low and even. "I see the day has arrived. A day that many prayed for. A day that many feared." Arut said nothing, because silence in this moment spoke more honestly than words could. The man turned his attention to the twin sisters. A faint, nearly invisible smile curved at his mouth. Not of joy, not of mockery, but something colder, something that knew too much. "You kept your promise," he said to them, "to protect him, to stand beside him, to ensure that the truth would never reach him until this very moment." A ripple of whispers flowed through the guests. The air felt like glass on the verge of cracking. Arut looked at the sisters again. Both of them avoided his eyes now, a sign more powerful than any confession. The man stopped a few steps away from the altar, close enough that Arut could see the faint, jagged scar that ran behind his jawline. A scar earned in violence. A scar Arut remembered, though he had never known the face of the man who carried it. The stranger's voice lowered, and every word weighed heavy. "The attack that night was not meant to kill you, Captain. It was meant to reveal you, to reveal what you mean to them, to reveal what they were willing to risk." The bride stiffened. The other twins' breath trembled. The guests watched like witnesses to a fate they could not intervene in. Arut took one step forward, his voice steady. "Why now?" The stranger's eyes softened, but not with mercy. "Because the person who ordered that attack is closer than you think, closer than any of you have ever allowed yourselves to believe." The cathedral fell silent again, its ancient stones holding the weight of every heartbeat. The bride's lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but no words formed. Her body leaned just slightly toward Arut, as though by instinct alone she sought his presence. The other sister slowly raised her hand, pressing it against her own heart, as if steadying something inside herself. The stranger's gaze passed over them once more. "There is something both of you have not yet told him, something you agreed to bury for the rest of your lives. But you both knew the truth would surface, And now the time has come. Arut's fingers curled at his sides. His breath felt heavy in his chest, as though his own body was preparing for something he could not yet name. The bride's eyes lifted to him. In them was love, and guilt, and something deeper, something that had been carried for years. The other twin drew in a slow breath, her voice quiet and steady when she finally spoke. Arut, the person you have sworn loyalty to, the one you trusted with every decision, the one who guided your rise in the police force, the one you believed would protect you. She paused. The silence tightened, stretched, held. That person was the one who ordered your death. A shock ran through the room like electricity. Someone gasped. Someone dropped a flower bouquet. Someone prayed under their breath. But Arut did not move. His expression did not break, not outwardly. Inside, the truth crashed. The stranger stepped back, placing himself near the open doors, like a shadow returning to where it came from. Your enemy has always been beside you, he said. And if you wish to survive what comes next, you will need to decide whom you will trust when the truth finally stands without disguise. The candles flickered again. The storm outside deepened, thunder rolling like a warning. The man turned to leave. Neither sister called out to stop him. Arut watched him until he disappeared beyond the heavy doors. Rain began to fall outside, soft at first, then harder, like the sky itself was trembling. The guests remained frozen, waiting for Arut to speak, waiting for him to choose. But Arut did not speak. Not yet. He turned his head slowly, looking at the sister who stood beside him, then the one who stood before him. Both of them watched him with eyes full of truths they had never wanted to give him. The moment stretched, deepened, held, and the answer he was about to speak was just about to break the room open. But the story did not move forward yet. Not yet. The moment stayed suspended, unspoken, charged, waiting. Arut remained standing at the altar, but the atmosphere around him had changed entirely. The celebration had dissolved, replaced with the quiet tension of a courtroom, where every truth held the power to destroy someone. The guests sat in utter stillness, as if afraid that even moving might shatter the fragile moment suspended in cathedral air. The bride beside Arut finally exhaled, her voice soft and almost fragile. We wanted to tell you long before this day, but we fear what you would do once you knew. The other sister stepped closer, her posture showing strength, yet her eyes carrying the weight of years spent holding a secret too large for one heart alone. Your loyalty, she said gently, was always your greatest power, but also your greatest weakness. Arut looked at her slowly. His jaw remained firm, but his eyes held a reflection of someone standing before a door he had never intended to open. He did not speak yet, but they could feel the shift happening inside him. The bride took a step nearer to him, her voice trembling with honesty this time, even without fear. Arut, the one who had you targeted, the one who has been shaping your path in the shadows, is not an enemy you met in battle. It is someone who has walked beside you, someone who gave you opportunities, someone you defended. Arut's breath steadied, but it did not soften. He knew exactly who they meant, but knowing and accepting were two different kinds of truths. The stranger's final words lingered like smoke in the air. Your enemy has always been beside you. Thunder rolled outside once more, longer this time, echoing through the stone hall. It felt as if the very sky pressed itself against the cathedral walls. The guests waited for Arut to collapse, to break, to react with rage. But instead he straightened his posture, his presence steadying like a soldier preparing for war. He lifted his eyes to the bride. How long have you known? Her lashes lowered. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Since the night of the warehouse. I recognized the voice giving the order. I recognized the tone of command. It was not a stranger. And I knew that if you discovered the truth while wounded and desperate for answers, you would have destroyed yourself trying to face him alone. The other sister added, her tone firm but not forceful. So I begged her to hide it, to keep it silent, until you were strong, until you were ready to see the truth for what it truly is. Arut's gaze moved between them, slowly measured, searching, not for deceit, for the emotional scars that confirmed their story. And he saw them, in the bride's eyes, in her folded hands. in the tension of her shoulders, in the quiet endurance of a heart that had loved him without ever receiving full recognition in return. And in her sister, he saw a different kind of love, one built on sacrifice, distance, and choosing to remain the shadow so the other could be light. The storm outside intensified, rain striking the stained glass windows like 1,000 quiet knocks. Arut raised his hand slowly, carefully, and placed it over the bride's trembling fingers. Her breath caught softly, not in surprise, but in a silent ache that had been waiting to breathe for years. He turned to the other sister. His voice, when it came, was steady, but underneath it was something deeper, a tide shifting direction. I will not confront him here. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected confrontation, revelation, justice delivered like lightning. But Arut understood something deeper. War was not won in a moment of shock. War was won with preparation, patience, and choosing the battlefield with precision. The bride's eyes glimmered, relief and sorrow intertwining. Arut continued, I will speak with both of you, alone, away from this place. The cathedral seemed to exhale, though no one dared to speak. But just as the tension began to settle, the church bells rang, not the soft ceremonial chime that had started the wedding. This was different, urgent, rapid, an alarm. The doors of the cathedral shut themselves with a heavy thud, the wind slamming them inward as if something powerful had pressed upon the city. The candles flickered once, twice, then steadied again with a cold flame. The guests rose in confusion, murmurs rising into anxious voices. The twins turned toward the doors with the same sharp awareness, their bodies tense and alert. Arut felt it too, an unseen presence, a shift in the air, the feeling of being watched, not by the stranger who had already left, by someone else, someone who had arrived quietly, someone who did not need to announce themselves to be recognized. The sound of slow, steady footsteps approached from behind the closed cathedral doors. No one spoke. No one moved. Arut's fingers loosened from the bride's hand as he took one single step forward, his voice calm but sharpened like steel. It is him. The sisters did not answer. They did not need to. Everyone in the cathedral knew exactly who waited on the other side of those doors. And the moment the doors would open would change everything. But the doors did not open yet. Not yet. The story held itself still, waiting, trembling, poised on the edge of what comes next. The sound of footsteps behind the cathedral doors did not quicken, did not force itself. They were slow, measured, intentional, like the one approaching already owned the room and did not need permission to enter it. The air felt heavier, as though the entire building had begun to hold its breath. The bride's fingers tightened around her bouquet. The other sister shifted slightly, positioning herself where she could see both Arut and the entrance clearly, her body language sharp and ready. Arut's gaze remained fixed forward, not angry, not afraid, but steady, the look of a man who had walked through storms and was ready to step into another. A thin line of silence cut the space between the people and the sealed doors. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. Then, with a soft groan, the cathedral doors began to open, not pushed, not forced. They simply gave way, as though the person on the other side had only to stand near them for the world to yield. But instead of a person, the wind entered first. Cold wind, carrying the faint scent of metal and rain-soaked earth. The kind of wind that comes from places where violence lingers. The guests shivered, not from weather, but from something instinctual. Footsteps followed, but the person who entered did not walk all the way inside. He remained at the threshold, framed by stormlight and shadow. He wore the uniform of authority, dark navy, pressed perfectly. The insignia displayed on his shoulder was unmistakable. The chief superintendent, Arut's superior, the very man who guided his career, praised him, pushed him forward, placed him in every crucial case. The guests were stunned into silence. No one had expected him to arrive at the wedding without invitation. No one had expected him to arrive now. His expression was serene, almost gentle. A smile traced his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. His gaze first fell upon Arut, then upon the bride, then upon the sister, beside her, and slowly, the faintest hint of amusement flickered in his eyes, as if he had known this confrontation was coming long before any of them understood it themselves. Arut felt the pressure of the moment settle onto his shoulders, but he did not bow under it. He stood tall, unmoving. The chief stepped forward, the echo of his footsteps quiet but piercing. He stopped only a few steps inside the cathedral. "I apologize for my late arrival," he said evenly. "The city has been restless today. Perhaps it sensed change." The bride lowered her eyes, her breath trembling. The other sister did not look away from him, her jaw tightening ever so slightly. Arut answered with a calmness that was colder than silence. "What brings you here?" The chief smiled again, a practiced expression, a crafted gesture. But now, stripped bare, it revealed something underneath. Possession. "I came," he said, "to offer my blessing. After all, a union such as this will shape the future." The words were chosen carefully. Too carefully. Arut took one step closer, his presence no longer the gentle warmth of the groom, but the controlled intensity of the officer he had always been. "The future you intended for me," Arut said, "was not survival." The chief did not deny it. He only breathed softly, as though listening to something far away. The guests were frozen, witnessing history unfold. No one looked away. The wind pressed through the open doors again, carrying with it the low rumble of thunder and the scent of approaching rain. The chief finally spoke again, his tone soft enough that the silence made every syllable echo. "You were never meant to fall. You were meant to rise, but not in the direction you chose." Arut held his gaze, unblinking, unshaken. "And who chose it for me?" The chief's eyes shifted to the twins. Both sisters stood motionless, not in fear, in preparation. The chief's gaze lingered on them, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Recognition, memory, history buried and resurrected all at once. "You both interfered," he said quietly. "You changed the course. You defied what was necessary." A murmur rippled across the cathedral. Something in the chief's calm voice felt more dangerous than anger ever could. The bride lifted her chin slightly. Her voice, though soft, held a strength refined by years of sacrifice. "We protected what you planned to destroy." The chief's eyes narrowed, but only for a fraction of a second. Arut took another step forward, closing the space between them. The air between the two men felt like the steadiness before lightning strikes. Rain began to fall harder outside. The cathedral windows shimmered with streaks of water sliding down the stained glass. The chief spoke again, so quietly that only those closest truly heard him, but the tone carried enough weight to silence every remaining whisper. "It is time to leave this place. All of you. The ceremony is over." But no one moved. Not Arut, not Mira, not Lila, not the guests. The chief's hand lowered to his coat pocket, but he did not draw anything. He did not need to. The tension was already deep enough to cut. Arut's voice broke the stillness. "No one leaves." The chief looked at him, and the faint smile vanished. The storm outside surged, lightning illuminating the stained glass in a sudden burst of pale fire. The cathedral pulsed with silent, pulsing suspense. Every answer, every confession, every confrontation, all hovered right there, right at the edge, ready to break. But it did not break. Not yet. The moment held, suspended, breathless, waiting for the next heartbeat to decide everything. The air inside the cathedral shifted, not with sound but with intent. Like the walls themselves understood that what stood between these people now was no longer love, nor ceremony, but truth that had been sharpening in the dark for years. Arut and the chief faced one another, two men who had once walked the same path, now separated by a betrayal neither spoke of aloud. The guests did not whisper anymore. They did not breathe loudly. They sat frozen in the weight of what was unfolding, unsure whether they were witnessing a wedding, a reckoning, or the first move of a war. The bride stepped closer to Arut. Her presence was a quiet anchor, steadying, grounding, yet her eyes remained locked on the chief, as if she knew every shift in his expression meant something important. The other sister, Lila, moved subtly to Arut's opposite side, her posture calm but alert, not confrontational, but ready, ready in the way only someone who has lived with danger understands it. The chief finally took one step forward. Each click of his polished shoe against the marble floor rang far too loud. "When I chose you for leadership, Arut," the chief said, his tone smooth and level, "I did so because I believe you could carry the burden of order, duty, purpose. You had the discipline to reshape chaos into structure." Arut said nothing. His silence held more force than any argument. "But you became something I did not anticipate." The chief's gaze sharpened. "You began to act with heart, emotion, attachment. You allowed yourself to care." The words were not criticism. They were accusation. The bride inhaled softly, her fingers gently brushing Arut's sleeve, grounding him again. Lila's voice cut through the stillness. "What you call attachment, we call humanity." The chief turned his gaze fully to her, not with anger, but with recognition. "You always understood more than you should have," he said. "And that is why you were the one I watched most closely." A hush passed through the crowd. Lila's expression did not break. Her eyes remained steady, locked on his. The bride's breath faltered, her fingers tightening. That single reaction told Arut everything. The chief saw it too. "You thought you hid it well," he said, addressing both sisters now. "Your agreement, your promise, your decision protect him at all costs." His gaze slid slowly back to Arut. "And he never asked you why." Arut finally spoke. His voice did not waver. "I did not need to ask. I trusted them." The chief's expression shifted just slightly, enough to reveal disappointment, or perhaps anticipation. "That is why you are standing here today," he said. "Alive, loved, but unprepared." The air tightened. Arut's eyes narrowed. "Unprepared for what?" The chief looked to the cathedral doors behind him, to the storm, to something beyond the city itself. "For the truth that is about to arrive," he said. The bride's chest rose sharply. Lila stepped half an inch closer to Arut, instinctive, protective. Arut remained unmoving, though the tension in his shoulders deepened. "What truth?" he asked. The chief's voice lowered, resonating through the hall like a quiet bell. "The night you were attacked, there was more at stake than your life, more than your career, more than your future. That event was not meant to end you. It was meant to reveal you." He paused. "To reveal you." The word struck something deep. The bride's eyes closed, just for a heartbeat, not in weakness, but in acceptance of something inevitable. Lila looked downward, the faintest shadow of sorrow passing over her. Arut felt the shift, the way the room itself seemed to tilt. The chief stepped forward again. "There is something that both of them have kept from you, not out of deceit, not out of selfishness, but out of necessity." The storm hit the stained glass in a loud burst, rain thundering like 1,000 fists. The entire cathedral seemed to listen. Arut looked slowly to the bride, then to Lila. Both their expressions had changed. Softer, heavier, full of something that had waited far too long to be spoken. The chief spoke once more, his voice so quiet the silence had to lean in to hear it. "Tell him who he is." The bride's breath trembled. Lila's eyes lowered. Arut's heart did not race. It slowed, steadied, prepared. The truth waited at the edge of their lips. Everything that had led them here, every sacrifice, every hidden scar, every late-night whisper shared between sisters, was leading to this single moment. They were about to speak. Their voices rose. But the cathedral's doors suddenly slammed shut, hard, as if struck by a force from outside. The candles flickered violently. The storm surged. The room darkened for the briefest moment, and the moment to reveal the truth stopped there, held, suspended, waiting. The cathedral trembled under the force of the doors shutting. The echo rolled through the hall like a warning, deep enough to be felt in the bone rather than heard with the ear. The guests looked around in confusion, but none dared to speak. Something unseen had entered the space, not through the doors, not through windows, but through the silence itself. Arut took a slow breath. He did not step back, did not break eye contact with the chief, and did not allow the fear rising in the room to touch him. He had been trained to face chaos. But this was not chaos. This was truth pulling itself to the surface. The bride placed her hand over her heart, as if remembering something that had been locked away for far too long. Lila's posture shifted again, not defensive, but steady, prepared not for a fight, but for revelation. The chief did not look startled by the doors or the storm. He remained composed, his expression unreadable. His arrival had not been to disclose the truth. It had been to force it out. The bride stepped forward first. Her voice did not shake now. It had the sound of someone choosing to carry responsibility instead of fear. "Arut," she said gently, "everything you believe about your past is incomplete." The guests held their breath. Lila moved to her side. Her eyes only slightly softened, though her strength remained clear. "You were not found by chance," Lila continued. "You were not raised where you were by accident. Your life did not begin where you remember beginning." Arut's expression remained calm, but his heartbeat slowed again, the way it does when a person senses something important approaching. The chief watched him with the quiet focus of someone observing an answer to a question only he understood. The bride took another small step. "You were taken from somewhere else. Long before you entered the academy. Long before you became a symbol of justice. Long before the city ever knew your name." Arut did not react outwardly, but inside, a door cracked open. Memories, not full memories, but sensations. The sound of water, a woman's voice, a gold bracelet, then darkness. Lila's voice continued, smooth and low. "There were people who feared what you would become if you knew where you came from. They believed your identity needed to be rewritten. Your history needed to be hidden. Your purpose needed to be directed." Arut spoke at last, his tone steady, but holding a depth that resonated. "Who did this?" The bride exchanged a brief look with Lila. One silent conversation passed between them in a fraction of a second. A promise, a shared burden, a truth neither wanted to be responsible for alone. And then the bride answered. The chief was not the only one involved. The tension in the room tightened sharply. The chief did not flinch. Instead, he lifted his gaze slightly, as though acknowledging a fact rather than denying an accusation. "There were others," Lila said, "people with influence, people with power, people who believed that your life would change the balance of everything." Arut took one step forward, not in anger, in understanding. "What balance?" Silence stretched. The storm deepened, wind pressing against the stained glass with the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. The chief spoke then, his voice no longer soft. "The balance between peace and control, between justice and order, between choice and destiny." His gaze locked with Arut's. "You were never meant to choose your path. You were meant to fulfill it." A quiet shock rippled across the faces of the guests. But Arut did not look away. The bride's voice broke the silence again. "But we believe you deserve to choose. And that is why we hid the truth." Arut looked at her. Her eyes held love. Not gentle love. Love shaped by sacrifice, by silence, by waiting for the right moment that never arrived. Lila stepped closer, her hand slowly reaching out but not touching him. "You deserve to know who you are. But once the truth is spoken, there will be no going back." The rain outside pounded harder, as if urging the revelation forward, as if the world itself demanded the truth to be named. Arut stood still, the storm reflected in his eyes. The bride inhaled. Lila exhaled. The chief watched. Every heart in the room hung on the edge of the moment. The bride opened her mouth to speak the truth of Arut's origin, but before a single word could form, the cathedral lights went out. The darkness fell all at once. Complete, soundless. The storm stopped, and the truth remained unspoken, suspended, held, waiting. The cathedral bells rang with a force that seemed to shake the ceiling. The sound was not chaotic. It was measured, rhythmic, as though signaling a moment that had been waiting for years. The guests stood frozen. Some covered their ears. Some looked toward the tower. But no one ran. No one screamed. Everyone felt they were standing inside something larger than themselves. The woman did not look away from Arut. She let the bells ring. She let the echoes sink into him, into the marble floor, into the stained glass, into the air. Arut's breath deepened, not from fear, but from a sense of something unfolding inside him, something that had always been there, waiting for the right sound, the right moment, the right recognition. The bride stepped forward, but only slightly. Her body moved as though pulled by gravity, not choice. "Do not move closer," Lila murmured to her, without lifting her gaze. Her voice carried warning, protectiveness, fear of something only she and the bride understood. But the bride's eyes were filled with something different. Love, yes, but love that had lived under the weight of silence and secrets too heavy to carry much longer. The woman turned her head, just barely, acknowledging the bride and Lila with a glance that spoke of history. Shared history. Painful history. You kept him safe. Her voice did not waver. You did well. The bride's throat tightened. Lila's eyes flickered with something like shame. The chief stepped closer now, the lines in his face sharper, older, as though time itself weighed heavier on him in this moment. "This is not the place," he said quietly. His tone was controlled, but there was urgency beneath it. "It is not yet time." The woman's expression did not shift. Time is no longer something you control. The bells continued to ring. Heavy, unbroken, like truth knocking on the doors of a world. Arut looked into the woman's eyes, and something in his chest tightened. Not pain, recognition, like remembering someone's voice from before birth, like recognizing warmth before knowing its name. He spoke softly. "I have seen you, not in memory, but in the quiet spaces of dreams, in a voice that came when the world was silent, in a presence that followed him in the wind, in the rain, in the feeling of being watched but never alone." The woman's eyes softened. "Yes." The bride's hand lifted, trembling as though reaching for something she feared she was not allowed to touch. "Do not," Lila whispered again. But the bride could not stop herself. She looked at Arut, her voice strained, almost breaking. "We were trying to protect you. All this time, we thought we were doing the right thing." Arut did not look away from the woman. From who? The woman answered before anyone else could. "From what comes after you remember." The guests began to shift uneasily now. They did not understand the words, but they felt the meaning. Things that are remembered can no longer be stopped. The chief raised his voice, sharper this time. "This conversation ends now." But the bells continued, louder, as though the tower itself refused to obey him. The woman turned to face the chief, fully for the first time. "You took what was not yours to shape." The chief did not back away. "I prevented disaster. You prevented choice." Their voices were not raised, yet the weight of each word was heavier than the storm outside. The bride's breath hitched. Lila closed her eyes. Arut stood between them, the storm inside him building, not outwardly visible, but present in the stillness of his posture, the intensity of his gaze, the quiet strength of his voice. "Tell me," he said. The woman stepped closer. So close the air between them trembled. "I will." The bells suddenly stopped. Silence dropped like a curtain. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to pause. The woman inhaled, preparing to speak the truth that would reveal everything. And then the cathedral doors unlocked themselves. Slowly, deliberately, as though guided by hands no one could see. The guests turned toward the entrance, breath held, frozen in expectation, waiting for the figure who was about to step through, waiting for the face that would change everything again, waiting for the moment that would reveal what this entire day was truly built upon. But the doorway remained empty. The silence held. The moment stretched, and no one entered. Understood. Here is a final ending episode, complete, emotional, and concluding the arc with weight and resolution, without rushing or weakening the atmosphere. The cathedral doors stood open, though no one stood upon the threshold. Only the silent night waited outside and the city beyond it, unaware of the moment unfolding in its heart. The guests remained motionless, as though the world itself had paused to listen. The woman lowered her gaze, the hint of sorrow passing through her expression. Not a dramatic grief, not a violent regret, but the quiet sadness of someone who has known loss longer than memory. She looked again to Arut. "It does not matter who enters," she said softly. "Your truth has already arrived." Arut's breathing steadied. The storm inside him, once churning and unformed, now settled like a tide finding its shore. The bride watched him, her eyes shining with something fragile and brave. She had loved him through silence. She had loved him through fear. She had waited for this moment, even though she did not know how much it would change everything. Lila stood near her, shoulders held with the strength of someone ready to face consequence. The chief remained grounded in a position of authority, yet his eyes revealed the weight of a man who had held the world too tightly in his hands. The candles around the cathedral flickered into flame again, not by wind, not by touch, but as though they simply chose to burn. The woman stepped closer to Arut, her presence now almost gentle. "You were not made to follow," she said. "You were made to decide." Arut closed his eyes for a single breath. He did not need to remember every detail to understand it. He felt the truth. He accepted it, not as revelation, but as return. When he opened his eyes, he looked at the bride. Her heart trembled, but she did not step back. He reached for her hand, not to claim, not to possess, but to acknowledge. Her fingers curled into his gently, as though this small touch carried more meaning than any vow spoken before witnesses. Lila finally allowed her posture to loosen, not relieved, but resolved. The chief exhaled, as though releasing something he had held for far too long. Arut looked to the woman, the one who had hidden him, the one who had found him again. His voice was quiet, clear. "What happens now?" The woman's eyes reflected no fear, no triumph, only truth. "Now," she said, "the world becomes yours to shape." The bells did not ring. The storm did not surge. The candles did not flicker. The cathedral simply stood in silence, witnessing the moment a man stepped into his own name, his own history, his own destiny, without needing to hear it spoken aloud. No shouts, no revelations, no grand gesture, only a shared understanding. The guests began to breathe again, slowly, softly, as though waking from a dream they would never fully understand. The woman stepped back, her presence fading into the stillness, not disappearing, not leaving, simply no longer needing to stand in front of him. Arut held his bride's hand, steady and unhurried. She lifted her head to meet his eyes, and in that gaze there was no confusion, no doubt, only the promise of a path they would now walk with open truth, not hidden truths. The cathedral doors remained open, not as a warning, but as an invitation. Arut took the first step forward, not into mystery, but into choice. And the world, quietly, without fanfare, changed. End.